Michigan Out of Doors Online is brought to you in part by Big Fish Charter Services in Elginak. Experience a world-class muskie fishery on Lake St. Clair for predator fishing or a once-in-a-lifetime trip on the St. Clair River to tangle with a prehistoric lake sturgeon at Big Fish Charter Services. It's all about big fish.
Welcome to Michigan Out of Doors. I'm Jenny Olson, and we've got an exciting show for you this week. With deer seasons upon us, sometimes we need to call on the help of friends to help us find a deer that we've hit out there in the woods. Well, this week, we're going to check in with the Michigan Deer Tracking Hounds. That's exactly what they do, and they've helped a lot of people find their deer out there in Michigan's woods. We're going to take a look at what goes into training one of those deer tracking dogs, and Jimmy and the guys have some other fun stuff for us this week too.
Well, Jenny, I was hoping to have a very successful opening day archery hunt for you, but you know what? If you're a bow hunter, you know it's hard to kind of schedule that stuff in. So instead of that, which will be coming in the next couple of weeks, we're going to sit down on this week's show with Dr. James Kroll, also known as Dr. Deer. He is a national leading expert when it comes to deer management. We're going to learn a little bit about our deer population from him, or at least through his eyes. We're also going to have something that I know we've never done here on Michigan Out of Doors before, and that is do a little crayfish trapping and a little crawdad boil to go along with it. Lots of good stuff on this week's show. You stay tuned. I'm Jimmy Gretzinger, and it's time for Michigan Out of Doors.
From the first spring rains to the soft summer breeze, dancing on the pine forest floor, the autumn colors catch your eyes. Here come the crystal winter skies. It's Michigan, Michigan Out of Doors. Someday our children all will see this is their finest legacy, the wonder and the love of Michigan. As the wind comes whispering through the trees, the sweet smell of nature's in the air. From the Great Lakes to the quiet stream, shining like a sportsman's dream, it's a love of Michigan we all share.
Michigan Out of Doors is presented by Greenstone Farm Credit Services, making recreational land ownership possible across Michigan and northeast Wisconsin. Begin your land financing journey at one of Greenstone's 37 locations or visit greenstonefcs.com. By G5 Outdoors, makers of the Quest and Prime bows. Manufactured and designed in Memphis, Michigan, G5 offers archery bows, broadheads, and accessories. On the web at g5outdoors.com. By Country Smokehouse, offering a variety of meat products. Country Smokehouse is located 3 miles south of I-69 on M53, just south of Imlay City. Country Smokehouse is a meat processor, a butcher, and a destination for sportsmen.
We all have one, that perfect spot, a special place we go to smooth out the ripples of the day. Our perfect spot is calling. Our perfect spot is pure Michigan. Your trip begins at michigan.org.
As deer hunters here in Michigan, we all strive for that one moment. The moment that all of our hard work pays off, and after scouting, planning food plots, hanging stands, and practicing relentlessly to pull off a good, clean shot, we finally have a chance to put it all together when that buck comes into range. There's nothing like the feeling of a successful hunt with a quick, clean shot. But as the saying goes, if you hunt long enough, you're bound to make a mistake. Sometimes a perfect arrow defies all logic and doesn't hit the mark. Sometimes a branch meets our slug before it finds its intended target. In these times, we gather the troops and search for our trophies with heavy hearts. More often than not, without a blood trail, the odds of finding our quarry diminish. That's where Rob Miller and his deer tracking hound Cypress come in to save the day. Over the years, Rob and Cypress have helped hundreds of otherwise hopeless hunters find their lost deer. In 2007, Rob started an organization called Michigan Deer Tracking Hounds. He uses a specially trained dachshund to track and find deer using strictly the scent of that deer and not the blood trail. What started as a necessity turned into a passion for Rob.
I got into it because as a bow hunter, I've wounded plenty of deer, and all of a sudden I realized there's no one else offering the service, that our state legalized it probably 15, 16 years ago. So that's when I decided to get a dog and start training. Basically, it's an organization that we offer our dogs for service for tracking deer. So when a hunter shoots a deer, they can't find it, they get on our website, our Facebook, or hopefully someone referred us to them. They give us a call, we work out the details, and we come out and track their deer down.
Have you helped a lot of hunters?
Yeah, we helped probably over 200 myself over the last couple of years. Maybe I think 114 recoveries we've had with my one dog Cypress, 60 recoveries with my previous dog Scout. We have right around 7 other guys with us working. I don't know the whole overall group number, but it's been a few hundred deer for everyone probably.
Rob has a few other members of his organization that also work with well-trained dogs to help find deer when hunters call on them. I ran into good friend Rich Ghoulish at the Woods and Water Show a few weeks ago and found out that he has a new puppy that's being trained by Rob too. I was able to tag along on one of the training sessions with Rob, Rich, and his 5-month-old wire-hair dachshund named Hank.
All right, today we laid a hoof-only track. Hoof-only is very important for a dog to learn the interdigital gland. Interdigital gland is the hoof, the scent of the hoof is just similar to the human's fingerprint. So each deer has its own individual scent. So we want to teach a dog to follow an individual scent. So when they're out in your properties, sanctuaries, there's thousands of deer, the dog can single it out and track the individual deer when there's no blood. Obviously, if there's blood, humans can track. So we want to teach our dogs to follow the deer's individual scent. So today we laid approximately 300-yard hoof-only track for Hank to follow.
We're out here in this park now, out on some trails, and you've got something set up already out here.
Yep.
How long ago?
It's probably been maybe 2 hours ago. And we laid the track here on like a mowed trail. We put orange markers up high so you, the viewers, can know the dog is correct.
Okay, cool. So when we see an orange marker, we know Hank's on the right track.
Yep.
All right, what will you see? Is it kind of like, the only thing I have to compare it to would be like a pheasant dog or a grouse dog getting birdie. Like, how do you tell, what's he gonna do? How do we know?
Well, yeah, usually Hank you'll see his nose go down, and he'll stay. You'll I don't know how to say, but you'll see some concentration in him, and you'll see that tail go, and it'll just be a continuous action in that same direction if he's on it.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
All right. So you're setting him down, and
yeah. What we're going to do is we're going to go and evaluate the hit site first. So we'll set him down, and Hank's still young. We're going to have him hopefully stay and sit and let his nose get used to the ambient situation that he's in before we actually put him up and give him the command to follow what you smell here.
okay.
Hank, find a buck.
What we're trying to teach Hank is to follow the scent exactly. It's very important that Hank follows the scent exactly, because if a deer beds down, we can maybe inspect a wound bed, then we'll know if we need to maybe back off, give that deer more time. So if a dog just randomly tracks and cuts corners, we may miss key sign, and we may end up pushing the deer onto adjoining property, or we may end up just pushing for miles, and we may never get after him. So it's very important the dog stays accurate. We lay a track and we let the dog naturally do its thing. If a dog can naturally follow it, then we just increase the age and distance. If a dog's not naturally following it, then we may add treats as we go. So to be, maybe go 30 yards, reward, 30 yards, reward. So the dog will learn to follow that interdigital scent because there'll be a reward. And eventually get rid of all those mini rewards so they go the whole distance and get the reward at the end. So right now what we're dealing with is Hank is clearly off. He got off, but we came into a wide open area. So now when coming down the trails, the scent is really confined to this trail with the weeds. You hit a big open area, more element to the sun's hitting it, the wind hits it, and it can actually distribute the scent across the area, so Hank got off track. So in this case, during training, we're gonna bring Hank back to where we know he was 100% correct and give him the command and restart.
Rob says using a real deer scent is the only way to train a dog to track a deer in these conditions.
We basically harvest the hooves from the previous deer season. While we're tracking for our customers, we ask to take their hooves off those deer. So ideally you want a hoof from a deer that's around 100, 200, 300 yards so that scent can actually be extruded from the hoof. So yeah, when we run a training track, we freeze those hoofs, we use those hoofs to go track deer. The interdigital scent works in many ways as far as its emotional state, its age, hormonal. So when a deer goes to a scrape and you see the buck scraping in it, what he's doing, he's spreading his hoof so the scent comes out. So he says, I'm a 5-year-old buck, this is my mindset, this is my age, this is my dominance. So when the other deer check that scrape, they learn that.
Oh boy, yes, yes.
Hank was right on track and found Rob's deer hooves, signifying a found deer. At only 5 months old, it looks like Hank is well on his way to sharing the same success as Rob's dog Cypress. Cypress has already helped many hunters find their deer here in the 2015 season and will no doubt help many more. Rob and his crew are always ready to help, but if you decide to use your own dog to track a deer, please check all the rules and regulations before heading out. Here's hoping for a safe and successful season here in Michigan's Out of Doors.
Well, here at Michigan Out of Doors Television, we try to bring you any changes to hunting and fishing regulations that may pertain to you as a sportsman. Well, there's one change that happened just within the last year or so that does affect us as sportsmen, and it's about a species that I really didn't know a lot about, and that is our crayfish population.
As Michiganders, we have access to some of the most varied natural resources in our country. Now, one species that you may not be too aware of is our crayfish population. Well, today I was joining a couple of guys from the DNR to learn about crayfish trapping. And if things went well, show me an old-fashioned crawdad boil. We started by setting up some new traps along a rocky river edge, and then checking some that were hopefully full of crayfish. With some changes to the regulations, we felt it was time to learn more about the rusty crayfish, which is actually an invasive species.
So rusty crayfish have been in the state of Michigan roughly since the 1970s. It's really proliferated and become abundant in a lot of our northern waters. And the ability that these invasive rusty crayfish have actually is they're very aggressive and have the ability to outcompete some of our native species. For example, the northern crayfish. So when these invasive rusty crayfish become introduced and established, they have actually the ability to displace some of our northern or native crayfish, which can cause some ecological impacts. So the good way to tell especially the rusty crayfish apart from some of our native crayfish is a rust red colored spot on the side of their body. This is a distinctive characteristic that only the rusty crayfish have, and none of the native crayfish species within the state will have that rusty red colored spot on the side of their carapace.
Traps with floats is a great way to get crayfish.
So the floats are to easily find them the next day when you go to lift them, and then also when you're in deeper water, you can actually pull the trap up itself by the buoy. Instead, I mean, in shallow water right here, you won't necessarily need them, but in deeper water, buoys are really, really useful.
Now, once you've placed your traps, which can be homemade or some modified minnow traps work well, it really doesn't take long, if there are crayfish in your waters, to get quite a few of these tasty critters.
We modified our regulations to address, we typically modify our regulations to reduce risk of introduction of invasive species. But with rusty crayfish now being established and abundant in many of our waters in Michigan, we wanted to provide our anglers or anyone with a fishing license the ability to keep these natives for food consumption. So the new regulation allows for the possession of rusty crayfish to keep, to bring home for a crayfish boil, versus in the past they're on our prohibited and restricted species list, which means the live possession is actually illegal.
So between the natives and the rusties, you can find yourself enough for a good crawdad boil.
We're going to do your basic down south crayfish boil. We got red potatoes, sweet corn, lemons, onions, and then crayfish boil, which is basically a mixture of salt, cayenne pepper, chili powder, paprika, and black pepper. And then there's a couple other crayfish recipes you can look up online, Swedish crayfish or etouffee, but this is what we're going with today. It's pretty basic and easy to do.
And how do you know when everything's done?
So you start out with boiling your vegetables just like you would do a stew or something like that, and then after you feel the potatoes are done, I usually go about 7 to 8 minutes with the crayfish to make sure they're all boiled through. All right, so we got our veggies in there. There are potatoes, corn, lemon, the salt and pepper, all the spices. So next step is to take our mud bugs here, crayfish, and we made sure that they're all live. They cook better when they're alive, otherwise they sometimes have a foul taste. Then we just dump them directly into the pot.
And so the seasoning's already in there?
Yep, everything's already in there.
All right. Now, Seth told me there are a couple of main ways to capture crayfish.
Well, there's multiple different techniques to capture crayfish. Some people will build their own. Other people will purchase minnow traps actually work, baited with any kind of fish, or beef liver actually is a common bait that folks will throw in their traps. But you can also go out and just grab them with your hands. You know, the typical flipping the rock and finding the crayfish and grabbing them with your hands, or even a small dip net, can be very effective for capturing crayfish.
If there are crayfish in your area, they're pretty easy to find and quite plentiful.
Typically shallow water. Anytime you can get in shallow water where there's some rocky shoreline or rocky substrate, it's a pretty good spot, and you'll typically find some rusty crayfish if they're there.
Now, I have had crawfish in the southern part of our country and loved them, so I was really interested to see just how these would stack up. They are a little harder to get to the tail meat, but you know what? It's worth the effort. Well, what do you think?
Pretty good.
Is it gonna work?
Oh yeah.
What do you think, Seth?
Just another way to enjoy Michigan's natural resources right here.
There you go. For more information about crayfish, please see the DNR guidebooks. It's important that we keep an eye on the invasives that come into our Great Lakes system. And I have to say, if a shore lunch like this is one way to combat the issue of invasives, well, count me in here in Michigan's Out of Doors.
For this week's show, I was able to sit down with world-renowned deer biologist Dr. James Kroll to learn a little more about some of the diseases affecting deer here in Michigan. Now, this is a two-part series. On this week's show, we're going to focus on tuberculosis, as well as some general tips on what we as Michiganders can do to improve our deer hunting.
First of all, I'm Dr. James C. Kroll. I've been blessed to be involved with deer for 45 years, I believe it is. And of course, I grew up in Texas and was educated in Texas, but I have not been limited to Texas. A lot of people say, well, that's a Texan, what do you know about anything? But I've worked in every state and every province, including Mexico and Canada, and even worked with deer in New Zealand and Argentina. So I've worked with deer everywhere, and I felt that was my obligation as a deer biologist to do that. The real disease issue in deer here in Michigan is not chronic wasting disease, it's tuberculosis. And tuberculosis was brought here in cattle and ultimately transferred to deer by commingling. And it was the first place and probably the only place where tuberculosis has been so prominent is in this area of the northeastern part of the Lower Peninsula. And so my interest here has been in figuring out ways to manage this disease. And that's something that's very important to point out, is you don't eradicate diseases. That's a very foolhardy thing to try to do. It cannot be done in wild populations. But you can manage it. And what we wanted to demonstrate was that this was an opportunity because of the foundation and because of Wayne Sitton, what he's doing up here. It was my opportunity to show that we could manage the disease and bring it down to a point of insignificance through management.
Dr. Kroll has been working with the Turtle Lake Club in Northeast Michigan to both improve the quality of hunting and reduce the prevalence of tuberculosis for many years, and the results speak for themselves.
I'm really proud of what the guys here at the Turtle Lake Foundation have done with Turtle Lake Club. It's been incredible. We have brought this herd down to half of what it was, but at the same time increased the harvest exponentially, the harvest of quality bucks. Our buck-doe ratio when Wayne and I first came here was probably a buck to 6 or 8 does, and a lot of biologists say that's not possible. Well, yes, it is when you have poor recruitment. And most of this area around here, before management, has recruitment in the 12-15% range, which is pretty low. Buck age structure was yearlings, the usual story, yearlings and nubbin bucks. Now we have bucks that are 6.5, 7.5, 8.5 years old here. And the neat thing about it is because of what we've done nutritionally and bringing the herd down is that the dogma has been that you can't have old bucks because they're going to have tuberculosis. Well, our tuberculosis infection rate has gone, depending on who you ask, from about 7 or 8% here down to non-existent, essentially. We rarely ever find one here. It's still here, but as I said, you can't eradicate a disease, you manage it. And so we've got older age class deer, we've spread our deer out, we have less deer, we have higher productivity, better nutrition, and as a consequence, healthy deer and deer that don't gather up and yard every year, or deer that are not likely to catch tuberculosis.
It's not every day you get to sit down with someone that has as much knowledge about deer and deer hunting as Dr. Kroll does. So I took the opportunity to get his opinion on what he thought Michiganders could do to improve their deer hunting from a habitat standpoint.
You know, I'll never forget my first trip here to Michigan. It was Rogers City, and it was in February. And the guy that put me up after my talk, he put me in a bedroom where I could look out the window at his sugar beet pile. And he'd brought an 18-wheeler load of sugar beets in there, and that had a light shining on it. And I looked out about 2 o'clock in the morning, and there was this poor doe on top of it trying to gnaw away at the sugar beets. That was the mentality at that time. Now, if you wanted to, the average guy that's got or guys that've got a little club out somewhere, the thing is, first of all, you got to manage your native habitat. In a lot of these places, the trees have grown up ever since the big fire of the late 1800s, and there's nothing to eat. A deer have to carry a sack lunch to get across a piece of property. So managing your woodlands is important, very, very, very important. But secondly, a good food plot program works wonders. What we do here and what we do throughout the Midwest is we use a cereal grain like cold hardy oats or wheat, and we use clover and chicory. That's the mainstay of our cool season. And most folks just focus on what they can plant in the summer. We focus on what we can plant for the fall that comes out of the winter into the spring. Then we worry about our summer crops, which of course would be soybeans, alfalfa. Our clovers come right back. Our clovers are really our mainstay. Chicory, where we can get it, I guarantee you only have to plant 1 or 2% of your land to a good food plot, and you can see a difference.
One of the more controversial topics among hunters here in Michigan is deer management, and Dr. Kroll was ready and willing to give his opinions on the issue.
There's a lot of dogma and misconceptions in Michigan about deer management, and you know the age structure of your bucks is right now is very poor. And how did they get that way? It got that way in 2 ways. One was we did not harvest sufficient does to get and provide sufficient nutrition to get our recruitment of our fawns up. 53% of fawns are going to grow up to be bucks. Okay. Now the other misconception is that somehow or another we need all these does. Well, you got 12-15% recruitment, so all those other does are inert ingredients. You're not. The truth is, you can actually, as we've done here at Turtle Lake, we have harvested probably 4,000 deer in 10 years off of here, and we have older age class bucks. We have them dying of old age out here, and so that whole idea that you need all these does to produce new bucks is a total misconception. I mean, it's time to put that one to bed. That's one that's 30 years old, and it's never been proven. But the one thing that really concerns me is the lack of deer management here. And I can say that I'm going to criticize the hunters, I'm going to criticize the landowners, I'm criticizing the DNR, is that we haven't done here in Michigan what we've done in lots of other states, a true deer management assistance program involving the landowners, involving the hunters. We could have a heck of a lot better deer than we have right now. Most of the time in Michigan, it has been what I call 3-second deer hunting, deer, buck, boom. And that boom is always going to be a yearling buck. And getting people away from the mentality of being a hunter consumer to being a hunter manager is very important for this state, because you've got the potential to grow some of the biggest bucks that we can produce anywhere in the country. And that real potential is not being achieved right now. And that's what our goal is here with the foundation, is we bring folks in and show them how they can go about managing their properties for deer. And we're not talking about a bunch of rich guys and it takes a lot of money to do it. We're talking about things that the average blue-collar guy can do, or gal can do, with a minimum amount of equipment and just a little willpower, letting that deer go by, not deer, buck, boom.
Special thanks to Dr. Kroll for his insight on both tuberculosis and deer management here in Michigan. Make sure to tune in next week for part 2, where we'll go over some interesting information about CWD.
Thanks for joining us this week for Michigan Out of Doors. Make sure you check us out online when you get a chance. You can do it a couple of different ways on our website at michiganoutofdoorstv.com or on our Facebook page at Michigan Out of Doors TV. We've got a lot of fun stuff coming up for you this fall on the TV show here. We'll be out on Harson's Island doing a little duck hunting. We'll be over in the Coldwater area trying our hand at a little deer hunting, pan fishing, and anything else we can get our hands on while we're over in that part of the state. And all sorts of fun stuff coming up for you.
Well, that's right, Jenny. There's going to be a lot of brand new stuff coming over the next few weeks here in Michigan Out of Doors. Gabe and Jordan are both in the UP right now doing a little bow hunting. I'm leaving later today to head up there and do a little grouse hunting. We'll have that for you. Lots of good stuff coming down the pike here at Michigan Out of Doors. Make sure you're joining us, and if we don't see you in the woods or on the water, hopefully we'll see you right back here next week on your PBS station.
Michigan Out of Doors is presented by the Michigan chapters of Safari Club International. For over 40 years, SCI has been protecting hunters' rights and promoting wildlife conservation here in Michigan and around the world. SCI chapter locations can be found on the web at firstformichigan.org. By Jay's Sporting Goods, with locations in Clare and Gaylord. Jay's, serving the Michigan outdoor enthusiast since 1971 with a wide variety of outdoor products. The gear, the knowledge, the tradition of Jay's, on the web at jaysportinggoods.com. By Rosie Brothers. Located in Dryden, Michigan, Rosie Brothers has been serving Michigan for over 40 years. Specializing in outdoor needs, Rosie Brothers features Kubota tractors and equipment for use in farm, home, or commercial needs. On the web at rosiebrosinc.com. By Propane, Clean American Energy. Propane retailers promote the safe use of Michigan-produced gas energy in homes, farms, and businesses across our great state. Learn more at usemichiganpropane.com. Closed captioning is provided by the Michigan Propane Gas Association. Clean American Energy. Propane realtors promote the safe use of Michigan-produced gas to outdoor enthusiasts across our great state.
When I wander far away, a dream stays with me night and day. It's the road that leads to my home state. I am a Michigan man. Changing seasons paint the scene like rainbow trout in a hidden stream. The white-tailed deer in the tall pine trees. I am a Michigan man.